Hello, everybody. You are Off the Edge with Matt and Zach once again, episode 7. And with us today, it's our great pleasure to welcome entrepreneur, computer science wizard, just all around amazing dude, hero of the day right now, actually, with this COVID-19 deal going on, Mr. Steve Penrod. Thank you so much for coming off the edge with us today.
Hey, my pleasure to be here, guys.
Cool. Awesome, man. And you've been a busy guy lately. I really appreciate you taking a little time out for us.
It's kind of nice to step back and do something completely different. So,
There you go.
Let's just jump right into it. Probably the most, pressing thing going on right now. Of course, we're all social distancing for this virus that's going around, and you have been neck deep in trying to track how this thing is spreading. Could you give us a little background on that deal?
Yeah. So, kind of one of those things where just the right, or at least a person at a place at a time that worked out well. So my company, I work for a company called Triple Blind, and what we do involves encryption technology and being able to protect data and protect code to be able to work together in privacy preserving ways. And one of the people that we were working with was at a healthcare meeting down in Florida back in late February. And during the middle of this healthcare conference, Mike Pence's team walks in and they're like, "Holy cow, guys, there's this COVID thing coming. Have you heard of it? And we got to do something. What can we possibly do?" And one of the ideas that came up out of this, was around this, what now everyone's heard of, or called contact tracing, and what you can do to enable contact tracing and help be able to contain the disease and contain the exposure and that next level of exposure around it to help stop the spread.
Or like flatten the curve, as they're all saying.
Flatten the curve, right? All of those things, right? So there's some easy ways to do it. And the scary thing about the easy ways is that it leads to what you call a surveillance state, right? Where everybody reports everywhere that they are at all times. That's the easy way of doing it. Nobody really likes the idea of being tracked all the time.
Right.
And so what we started working on with Ramesh Raskar, who at MIT is someone we'd been interacting with previously. He had this idea, and so I started implementing and building out this technology to do what's become COVID safe paths. And so the basics of it is, on your cell phone, you start recording your own position. So on your phone, never leaves your phone. It just takes and keeps track of where you are every 5 minutes, snapshots the GPS location. Never leaves your phone. You don't have to worry about it. It happens in the background.
Yeah.
And then at some point, if anyone who's running this is diagnosed with the disease, then part of that process, they can talk to one of these individuals that, generically we call contact tracers. And what's happened in the past is they sit there and they interview you for a few hours and they're like, "Okay, what'd you do yesterday? Who did you see yesterday? What'd you do the day before? What'd you do the day before that? And the day before that?" And trying to do that, ideally for 14 days. So, Zach, where were you 10 days ago? You have no idea. Nobody remembers.
Yeah.
It's just, and if you do remember, it's either, wrong or vague.
Right.
And then the other piece of it is traditionally, the only thing that they would ask about or would pay any attention to is someone whose name you know. Because if they don't know the name, there wasn't anything, "Oh, I was at this gas station and I was coughing." Well, who was around you? I don't know. And so it's impossible for them to do anything with that kind of information when it's just a verbal interaction. Right. So with our system, you've got all these times and places recorded. So if I'm working with them, I'm able to say, well, I was, looking through this digital history that I've been recording. Yeah, that was, I went to the gas station, and this is 7 days ago. While I was infectious, I now know, looking back, I realized I was infectious. They are able to keep track of that time and point. then remove anything that I do know information. So, I went to this friend's house, or I was at my grandma's house, or, I was at my own house. That information nobody else needs to know, because I know those people. You can convey the information to them, check, watch yourself, pay attention. Mm-hmm. But all those public places, now that information can be, automatically placed out there, and then our app can take in that information. So now you as an individual can download and say, oh, I was at that gas station at the time that this guy was infectious. It doesn't mean that I've got the disease at that stage, but it lets me know, start watching myself, because I have potentially been exposed to someone who has COVID-19.
Right.
And so that gives you as an individual very personalized information on how you can start behaving. So the ideal, the best case is I haven't been near anyone. I can start living my life relatively normally at that point, go out, go to work, go do things. But if I have a chance that I've run into someone, maybe I don't visit my grandma at that weekend.
Right.
Because, that's a high risk situation. And all I got to do is wait 14 days and let that roll off, and that'd be great. Or if I'm spent 7 hours next to someone, then maybe I want to be extra careful, or maybe actually go out and get tested to see, do I have something? Or certainly if I start to feel bad, I'm absolutely positively going to do, self-isolation and contact a doctor at that point.
Right.
So, that's the basics of this. It allows us to record our own information. It allows you, when you do get sick, to, in an efficient way, communicate with the healthcare organizations, and then work together as a group, as a community, in protecting each other and working together to do something about this thing that up until this point was kind of invisible and kind of terrifying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's an amazing approach.
And so the whole thing ultimately is voluntary, though.
Exactly. This is, that's one of the key things about this. It's on your phone. You keep it on your phone as long as you want. There is a value in sharing that information down the road, but It is up to you whether you ever ultimately do that or not.
And I think it bears repeating, because from what I see, social media, just talking with people, people are very concerned, obviously, about the safety of individuals, but they're also concerned about government maybe overstepping and placing limitations on people, violating rights, and then maybe we never get those rights back. So I think it bears repeating that this is not information that's being stored in some kind of government database to be used down the road.
It's yours.
It's yours, and you can do with that information what you want.
Yep, and is quite literally in the palm of your hand. Your cell phone is what stores that information, and that's to kind of looking across the board, different aspects of privacy. To the hopefully the 99% who do not ever get sick, they never have to expose any of their privacy. Right. If you are one of the people who does get sick, the contact trace process is already in place. You would be talking to a healthcare official asking you questions. So you're not asked to do anything that you're not already doing. You're sharing information that was already being asked. And then on the far side of it, when we're talking about the exposures, we're also being very cautious and careful in the way we do it. And, so that there have been some lessons learned from other countries who have been going through this. If you share too much information, there can be social stigma either for an individual or for a place. So, if we find out that my neighbor had COVID-19, and then down the road, my wife gets it, and then my wife dies, irrational behavior kicks in sometimes. And you're like, it was his fault. That's who killed my wife.
Right.
And people react, in times of stress, people do stupid things. Or, on the flip side, somebody was next to someone in a restaurant who coughed, and, they've discovered that's the transmission spot. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks from now, that restaurant is not giving anyone COVID-19, but there's a stigma associated because they find out that someone caught COVID at that spot.
Right.
And so we're doing our best to make sure that all of that information is not inappropriately used.
And that's a delicate task.
It's a delicate task, and I think it's really impressive that you guys are thinking that deep about it, thinking that far ahead about it. I appreciate
yeah,
that,
because
you know?
there are so many people out there that, like you say, it'd just be easier to we'll just track everybody and call it good.
Right.
Trust us.
Yeah.
Trust us. We're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, to be honest, all of the people who are doing that, I truly believe have the right intentions.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
But
Right.
the world's full of right intentions gone wrong, you know?
Well, you know, it was the right intention to, give Senator Palpatine
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
executive control.
Right.
But it
But
just takes
just
that
takes
bad
one
actor.
person.
Yeah, that one guy that just wants to, hey, grab this
I'm not
power for
giving the
myself.
power back.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, this is part of what we have here. There are a couple of different ways to look at privacy, and you know, there's privacy by trust. I suppose you're trusting someone else to retain your personal privacy, and that's where you get into trouble a lot of times because you know, for whatever reason, the bounds of that interaction change, and you know, you lose that privacy not because of anything that you agreed to originally. And then what we have is what we call privacy by design. So the system is set up to help retain the privacy of the individual. And, you know, that ultimately, I think, is better for all parties involved. You don't have the ability to do something wrong, then you can't do something wrong.
Yeah. Amen to that. And going back, I've followed some of your other projects, and I hope that we will get to talk about those as well. But I know that privacy has been at the forefront of your mind for a long time. But moving on from that for just a second, just like you said, it was just about a month ago that you started working on this?
So literally February 27th. So got a phone call a text on the 26th and started on it the 27th of February. So,
and you know, you can download the Safe Paths app on, and is it just Android right now?
So at the moment, as of 2 days ago, well, actually 1 day ago, we are in the Google Play Store, although the way Google systems work, if you search for it, you aren't going to find it yet. It doesn't show up in results for a couple of days. So if you go to covidsafepaths.org is the website.
Okay.
And there's a link from there to the Android store. And you can download the Android app directly out of there. It is coming from the Play Store. You just can't find it through regular search paths yet.
Okay. So what I'm getting at, in that short of a period of time, you have gone from 0 to 60 basically and created this whole thing. Now, you've mentioned you're working with the team on this. I know that you are both highly involved in the actual coding and creation of the app. Is that right?
Right.
And also with dealing with heads of state in trying to coordinate efforts and get this all worked out. It
has been, I've said to a couple of people, if I sat down next to you in a bar and started to tell you the story, you would not believe it, and you should walk away from me because I'm drunk. But yeah, quite literally, over the last month, I've been on the phone this morning, I was on the phone with Haiti, and also guys in Kansas City who are looking to implement the systems and helping them get down the road. Haiti is on the cusp right now. They've produced promotional videos, which are pretty awesome to watch, these Haitian cartoon videos talking about what we've set up and how that's all going through. But yeah, I've been on the phone with people in Vietnam. They call it the president, but it's more like a governor of an area of Italy, Germany. I won't list all of the locations in the United States, but major cities and health departments up and down the East Coast and West Coast and far north, and basically all over the place.
So basically, it's been a very high pressure situation, I'm sure. Very time intensive.
Yeah, I've quite literally 16 to 18 hour days, 7 days a week that I've been working for, especially that February until about the last week. I had to step back a little bit the last week, and it's ready for me to be able to step back right now. So I don't have to personally be involved in as much as I had been up until this stage. Other people, and there's a ton of people have been coming on board, and we've got everything from large organizations like Ernst & Young, who are volunteering hundreds of people to participate, to individuals from tech companies across the globe, either with or without their company's blessing, working on things. Workday, which you may or may not know, is one of these massive corporations that service gigantic organizations. So got a volunteer from there who's been core to this. Google, Facebook, individuals from there, individuals from India. There's an open source application group or organization that participates in stuff around the globe, who they've been working with it. I could go on and on. Silicon Valley, Y Combinator, individuals who are former PayPal and other massive Silicon Valley success stories, who are showing up. What can I do? How can I help? What can I do to make this happen? This is that 80s geeks try to save the world.
Yeah, we need a montage. That is amazing to me that that the app is out and fully functional in that period of time, and everyone pulled together. I think we're seeing that in a lot of different communities, science communities, trying to break down how this virus functions and stuff, and people sharing information across across borders,
right?
And all that cooperation has been pretty amazing to see. But I'm kind of floored. Kind of what we aim to talk about on this podcast is how I'm even having trouble putting it into words, but kind of creative minds actually being productive.
Community.
And I think this is a really vague question, I guess, and I'm not articulating it well at all. But I want to know, like, in a high pressure situation, time sensitive, with so many people involved, but yet you still have to find that creative spark, not just to be functional, but to also be intuitive and all these things. Like, how do you keep that all straight and put that together?
Caffeine.
Yeah. A lot of caffeine. There is a lot of caffeine.
I mean, do you just have to zen out and meditate, or I don't know, what's your process, I guess?
I would say that in a way I got trained for this over years. Before any of this came on, I was working at another open source initiative, open source company called Mycroft. And so at that point, what we were working with was voice agents. And so building, much like the Amazon Alexa or the Google Home technologies with open source community, and trying to build it in ways that were less centralized and that were open technologies and that sort of stuff.
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but again, like trying not to save and sell your data, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the idea of being able to have control, at least, of what's going on with your data, and being able to work together as communities and building this stuff out, which has advantages in various ways, where there's the option for combination of less bias and also underserved communities, because commercially it doesn't make sense to build, for example, a Welsh natural language voice assistant, because they're just there aren't that many people in Wales. How many people speak Welsh?
Right.
Why are they going to build that tool when you're trying to make money? But if we have tools that 5 or 10 people can get together, work together, and build this thing that can speak Welsh, that's like super empowering to these small communities of voice. And that was something that I did for 4 or 5 years, building that and working, again, globally with open source communities around the world. And for better or worse, when you're working around the world, daytime is different. so I was used to staying up weird hours and long hours and, having meetings at 2 a.m. I guess I've been training for a few years to be able to do this. And yeah, it was pretty intense. But I was fortunate in, the lessons I've learned and the examples I've seen from working with groups like Mozilla, the KDE community, and just, all these other great individuals who've been doing this sort of work for decades in the Linux community, Red Hat and Ubuntu and Canonical and all that. They've sort of blazed the trail for how do you work together, these, disparate groups in so many ways, how do you pull them together so that you're able to work? There's new technology that's evolved. If you're really geeky, there's a thing called GitHub, which is a technological gathering place for source code. And there's things so people can join into your GitHub project and they can post issues. They can give you submitted code that you can review and decide to pull into your code or not.
Okay.
And give feedback to each other and to really be able to build stuff, whether, people you've literally never met, except by some name on the screen.
I think
you're able to work with them.
Yeah. I think I've looked up, like DIY CNC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of that was on GitHub.
Yep.
And, you skim the surface of it and like, okay, that's out of my league.
Well, it is, it isn't. Everyone feels intimidated, the first time you get involved in something and you're like thinking about this is literally going to be seen by people around the world.
Yeah.
It's freaky,
Jumping back to Mycroft, was there a Kickstarter for that?
Yep.
Okay. You had mentioned it earlier, and I kept thinking, immediately I go to Sherlock Holmes, but I kept thinking, man, there was, and I remember I remember the whole video for it on Kickstarter.
Right.
And, yeah. I mean, I've never actually purchased or supported anything on Kickstarter. But man, I like going and looking through the projects.
Yeah.
One of these days I'll find that one and I'll be like, yeah, I got to do that one.
This is the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is there's so many projects that go up on Kickstarters and all these systems that, again, there's lots of good reasons I'm wearing right now the Megabots shirt. And I don't know if you remember Megabots. It was another biggie. So they were building these giant fighting robots was the idea.
That's just awesome.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And so I met these guys. They're really, really great guys. And they had tons of great intentions to build this stuff and to make this out. And they built, literally a 20-foot tall robot that, can move around and do all this stuff and could pick up a car and crush it and do all that. And I think they ended up raising over $1 million. It may have been $3 million that they pulled together.
Yeah.
It sounds like a ton of money, right? And
Probably not when you're building 20-foot robots.
Right. You and me were like, oh, they raised $1 million. How could they not do it? And
that's a lot of
$1 million
servos.
is not that much when you're trying to build this. And when you're now looking at the liability and the insurance you have to take out when you're able to throw a car across a ring, they get a little nervous about that sort of stuff. And, in the end, these guys did everything possible and they tried to be upfront about it, but, boiled down to, $1+ million into it, they couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
And, as a person doing that, you feel guilty. All these people helped you. All these people trusted you. And, they literally put their money behind you doing this. But, you worked for 2 years, 3 years trying to bring this to fruition. And if it fails, do you try and personally pay it all back? And these guys, they couldn't. I mean, they literally, they put their heart and soul into every bit of what they did there.
Yeah.
And
that's all you can do. I mean,
and I mean, that's the risk. That's the risk you take in supporting a project like that.
Sure.
Of course, there's always going to be that side that's like, well, I paid for this, and
Right.
but you don't do it if you're not willing to lose it.
Right.
That's the thing.
And that's the thing, that the upside and the downside of some of these Kickstarter projects is they got so good at presenting the project. It looks like it's right there.
Yeah,
and they're
it's
just
already
waiting.
done. It's just a matter of
2 days shipping,
Yeah.
and it's going to be in my. No, it's not actually 2 days shipping. There's so much. Even if there is a physical prototype, the process of getting from physical prototype to mass production.
Yeah.
I can tell you the Mycroft units that we produced for the first Kickstarter, the Mark I. I think we sold a bunch of them for $99, and then some more. I think is like $199. They cost us, at bare minimum, hardware was $179 for just the parts that went into these things. And then, you add up any kind of labor and effort on top of that, $0 were made.
Right.
And then the Mark II's been coming along. And again, that one's been stretched out, and they're still working on trying to bring that to reality. We've got, or they have now, physical prototypes that there's one sitting in my kitchen. It does do its thing, but there's a huge gap between that and being able to make 500 or 1,000 or 1 million.
Right.
Sure.
Right. And I see that side of it. I've built guitar pedals for a while.
Right.
Did music, did video, did guitar pedal building. It was kind of like throw it all at the wall, see which sticks. Well, the pedals didn't really take off, which is okay. But it's a fun skill to have. But yeah, I mean, you see the ones that are mass produced, and you see, from my perspective, I saw how cheap I could get parts. And of course, I undervalue my labor a ton.
Right.
So I'd see something that, and they'd sell it for this much, but you don't take into consideration the marketing and, the mass production. Even the smaller, pedal builders, as long as they're not like one-off pedal builders, they are, they're having the PCBs printed and shipped in. There are costs that I don't see, but at the same time, I'm like, well, that capacitor only cost half a cent.
Right.
What are you charging $99? There's only 3 components to that pedal.
Right.
Come on.
Yep.
And most pedals, the box. And the box. The box costs more than anything inside that thing.
Yep.
But yeah, that kind of, and it was kind of it was almost counterintuitive, because it was like, yeah, I see it from this side, but I also see it from this side, and
I think that really gets exposed when you start talking about products that aren't even physical, where you're
virtual,
talking about music, or you're talking about software.
Yep.
It's like, it's almost a little harder to try to get people to pay for that, because they're not getting a physical thing.
Right.
Well, and
It's
this is
just
the same thing.
Psychological.
Same thing applies for music.
Disconnect.
Because nobody's buying
absolutely.
physical music anymore,
Right.
and that's why music has always been ripped off.
Right.
Sure.
Always. And I mean, I'm guilty as anybody, but I pay for Spotify now, so I feel a little better about myself.
I was gonna say, I've never downloaded anything off the internet I didn't pay for.
I am right there with you. Every music, I've got 12,000 MP3s, but every one of those I either ripped off of a CD or that I owned already, or something I purchased directly. I draw a pretty hard line on that one.
The old generation of sitting waiting for the radio to play your song and get it on tape.
Yeah, I know.
And then the DJ talks over the intro. It's like, you bastard.
Those are the days. I do still have some of those tapes. But,
that's a Gen X thing, man.
Yeah.
Like people younger than us.
Actually, I think I still have I've got a tape deck stored in there.
Nice.
Yeah. So if we ever need to listen to some old cassettes, I don't think I have any more, but
I might have some stashed away somewhere.
I got a box of cassettes.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Cassettes are cool.
Millennials will never know.
The joy of the mixtape.
But yet they know vinyl. You know,
Yeah,
you want to talk.
it's all
You want to talk
coming
about a
back around to
format that has truly stood the test of time. And I love vinyl.
You know,
I really do.
I was thinking about it the other day.
Next
like,
album,
say
vinyl.
some 1,000 years down the road,
Mm-hmm.
aliens come and they bring back the record we sent up with Voyager,
Right.
and we'll probably still be using records.
Right? Yeah, somebody will be able to play it.
Yeah.
I think I was listening to, well, we're just going off topic here, but I enjoy it. I think I was listening to Lex Friedman's AI podcast, and they were saying something about like, in the 70s, we sent that record up, and, a civilization that's more advanced than we were then would probably be like, wouldn't try to build a record player. They'd probably just try to scan that disc for the information and rebuild it digitally. And
Sure.
yeah.
Unless they're as nostalgic as we are. I mean,
Yeah. I don't know. Just, I don't know why that thought I just found that interesting and wanted to share, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's a fascinating thought process, and you go into, the longevity of something. That's one thing that I always face in the software industry is the vast majority of the things that I've created are old, pitched. Everything that I worked with that 20 years ago at Autodesk pretty much aren't in use anymore, and they've been replaced with the next generation.
Yeah.
But there is something about, how do you make something so like the Long Now Foundation, have you ever heard of that? So the guy's trying to create the 10,000-year clock. Have you ever heard about this idea?
Oh, no, I haven't.
So
Lay it on me.
So there's this guy that he originally was doing super high performance computers, and that super high performance computer, there's the thing called the top 500 list that they keep, and it is the 500 fastest computers in the entire world. And the Paralyssion machine is one of the things that he created while he was at MIT, and it was massively parallel at the time, which nowadays your laptop there is probably faster than what the thing was. But at the time, he was at the top of that list. Mm-hmm. 3 months down the road, you move down, and probably 6 months down the road, you're completely off the list. It's just the way of the world around this stuff is you can't build anything that really lasts. So all of this work that he'd put into creating these things very soon disappeared. And, you have a legacy a bit where other people are building on your work, but what he created actually wasn't there. And I don't know for sure, I'm making a little bit of this part up in my head, but I think that led to the idea of how do you make something that truly lasts? And he came up with this idea of something super simple of a clock. How would you make a clock that lasts? I mean, super duper long time frame lasts. So if you look at 10,000 years, what happens to make something last for 10,000 years? You look at the pyramids and things along those lines. How do you make something? And you got to think about languages disappearing on you. You can't write the instructions in English and expect that 10,000 years from now, people can read those instructions. You look at geographic changes, the climate change, and you have an ocean appears that didn't used to be there, or you have earthquakes that come through, or you have, all these other things. How do you really make that happen? Or, geopolitical change so that, whoever was maintaining this thing for you, that group doesn't exist.
Gone. Yeah.
Right. And so, they're trying to think through all of this, and, just building it out of advanced materials probably doesn't work, because at some point in 10,000 years, even the most advanced material is going to wear out. So you got to have something replaceable. And so a lot of this has been a little highfalutin, but they are trying to literally build this thing. And
that's cool. I like that there's someone out there trying to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
You start with speculation and then turn it into reality.
And I like there's
and who knows what cool shit they'll find along the way of just doing that.
Right.
Well,
Maybe
and
that
just
in itself doesn't really mean a whole lot, except for it's a cool thing to do. but they could discover a whole lot along the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about the information. So if you're going to think about, the climate, you're going to think about the oceans rising or settling. There's climatology being looked at. I mean, you're approaching different avenues that ultimately don't have anything to do with the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But from that, you get a long-term model, possibly.
Right. One of the stories that I like kind of related to this is Oxford University. There's this, massive set of doors as you go into there, and they're gigantic, huge doors that they built out of the single tree, each door that swings open. After like 500 years, one of these doors started to rot, and they're like, "What are you going to do?" Well, they looked out there. There was an oak tree that was planted when they started the university. They cut that tree down and replaced the door.
Wow!
And just like that kind of thinking is what really you got to do for something.
The long game.
How am I going to play this long game? And, is that exactly why that tree was there? I don't know for sure, but
I hope they planted a new tree when they
planted a new tree. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm going to butcher this, but what is it like? I don't even know. It's something about like a wise man or something will plant a tree under which he will never feel the shade.
Right.
Yeah, that's not the quote, but it's
the sentiment there.
Yeah. And I think we just as a nation, maybe even a global culture, have kind of lost that for short-term gains a lot of times.
Oh, well, yeah.
Don't mean to get into like a lot
why we're
of
tearing down the rainforest. Come on.
Yeah, but
well, and I'm curious, kind of circling back, the whole COVID thing is going to be interesting to see the repercussions as the world emerges.
Mm-hmm.
Who starts looking at just a month or 2 months of time without the majority of human, interaction and interference with the environment, how it reset itself. And thinking about, the Venice canals where now they're crystal clear and they've got dolphins and jellyfish that no one had ever seen,
Right.
And, do we learn from that? Is there something?
And that's just one aspect, and it's an amazing, important aspect, but also, kids, college students especially, realizing that, they can do the majority of their learning online.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's like I'm, again, kind of going into the woods here, but I've kind of felt, and maybe this is, again, we're all Gen X, I'm at the very, very youngest end of it, but I kind of feel like I went to college, I got my degree in humanities, and as so many people did, I, in debt, didn't really use my degree, but we grew up believing that that's like what you had to do, and we believed in those institutions. And I kind of feel like now we're starting to see that, man, maybe these institutions are really outdated. Maybe they're great in the 1800s. They worked perfectly. Now we're starting to see we're kind of outgrowing them. And I wonder, and I think something like this is, again, just another influence or another instance, rather, that we're seeing is kind of a revelation, because it's like, man, maybe we don't need, I don't know. I mean, you have kids, we all have kids. And like, I don't know as a parent, like, should I be pushing my daughters into going to college? Will they get out of it everything that they're being promised they will get out of it? And again, I don't have anything against, obviously I value higher education, and I value myself.
And I think this whole situation has us looking at different things, or at things differently.
Yeah.
I think I see the forward thinking that you're talking about with that, but at the same time, over this last month, I've seen lots of things that are very 1950s. There's family units again.
Yeah,
there's interaction,
eating dinner together.
Yeah. So I'd love to see the best parts of all of this.
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you and I have been working, but at the same time, everything has still been at least a little bit different. You know what I mean?
Right. And by posing that question, you know, I'm not saying that I have an answer either. You know, I'm just saying, like, man, it's really making me think about, like, are there better ways that we can do things?
Right.
Like across the board.
Well, and I hope there are more people like that. Unfortunately, I think the majority is going to be like, woo, we can go back to Walmart without the mask.
Yeah.
You know, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and some of it might not be immediately obvious. I think, you know, it's kind of touching on the entrepreneurial thing. During this time period, people are starting to get ideas. You know, they're not going to necessarily be able to do all of them at this point in time. It's going to take them a little while. And I like to think back. You know, this complete speculation, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. If you go back to that earthquake that hit Silicon Valley in the late '90s, that collapsed the bridge between Oakland and Silicon Valley. You remember the one where it was the double-decker bridge that collapsed? Well, as a result of that, the drive to get to Silicon Valley from the other side of the bay went to, like, you know, I don't know, 5 or 6 hours to make it all the way around. So, you know, this hour-long commute suddenly became basically impossible to do. And I don't think it's coincidence that the advent of remote desktop and remote working technologies occurred right after that. I think that networking was just starting to become available, and all of these Silicon Valley companies that were, you know, suddenly hosed by this incredible commute time and having to deal with each other on the phone, started the process of creating, you know, the tools that we have today. So the Zooms and such that exist today are because of that tragedy that occurred, you know, 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while for them to all build up.
Absolutely.
But similarly, I think educational technology is going to be far different 5 years from now because of what's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lots of areas of our life, I think that's going to be true.
I agree. And I am excited to see in which ways we move forward on those fronts, and in the environmental thing, like you were saying, I hope it really wakes people up to just how much of an impact we have. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, this is I guess out of hard times, that's where you really get inspiration and the ability to think different because you have to. You know?
Right, getting back to the creative spark and stuff, you know, with necessity being the mother of invention.
Right, right. You know, and there are going to be some kids who grow up watching this and thinking about this and thinking differently because of this. And, you know, I truly believe that the next generation of everything, you know, engineers, entrepreneurs, musicians, you know, how do you play music together when you're not in the same room? You know, my daughter's taking an orchestra class right now. They can't play as an orchestra in their orchestra class. You know, there's so many things like this that they're going to come up with creative ways to deal with it. This week, they're doing a crappy job of it, you know. But they're going to try stuff next week, and they're going to try stuff the week after that, and they're going to come up with something that is cool and different, and, you know, not the same as all being in the same room, but valuable and interesting.
Right. Still pushing them forward and learning.
Yep.
It's amazing. We live in a pretty interesting time.
Well, yeah. Who would have thunk it? You know what I mean? Given you could predict, you know, massive earthquake. You could almost predict Yosemite blowing, which still could.
Yeah.
There's so many things that could go wrong.
You could predict a war, you know, but I don't think anybody would have predicted extreme flu. Which, granted, it's not flu; it's a respiratory thing. But
infectious disease. You know, this is just the right. You know, on the flip side, there has been, you know, over decades, they've been talking about this is one of the greatest threats to this world as it is today is,
Right.
a properly infectious but not immediately deadly disease can spread slowly, but then reluctantly, quietly, and then explosively behind it take out large portion of the population. And what is the impact of that? And I've been looking at it with everything from the hot zone. If you've read that book about Ebola or however you pronounce it, that disease was fortunately spectacularly scary enough that it didn't go very far. This is just quietly not bad enough that people don't freak out because no one's bleeding from their eyeballs.
Right.
And it let it slowly creep its way into the United States, for example, and everyone's like, it's just a flu. And, if it had been a flu where you're bleeding out, if your tongue was sloughing off, that would have scared people to not do it. But it was just not that bad. Right?
People aren't going to be scared unless it's zombies.
Yeah.
And then half the population is going to be excited.
I think this is our dress rehearsal for zombies.
I certainly hope so. Because, if we're going to go out, we need to go out with a bang.
Yep. My favorite zombie movie flick was, I think it's World War Z, where they're talking about, how fast it spread around the world, except in North Korea, because they had everyone's teeth removed within 24 hours.
Yeah.
I thought that was brilliantly true.
Well, and that's scarily realistic.
Yeah.
I
And I think North Korea, actually, it's not been too bad because they were brutally clamped down on everything in the country. So
I'm honestly surprised that, I guess because China's so packed, but I was surprised that it got as bad as it did because, China can be pretty ruthless too.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I've heard stories of people getting sick and then just being marched off, and never being seen from again.
Right.
But again, it's so densely populated.
Yeah, and those are just stories I'm hearing, so I don't have any factual information. Right. So,
yeah, and
don't quote me on that.
Well, and the difficulty of this entire disease right now is so much is unknown. Right now there's statistics just coming out that there's a good chance that the major cities, there was infection spreading before anyone even realized it. There's a huge portion of New Yorkers with the antibodies that never, as far as they know, never got sick. And so I think there was this quiet spread going on too. And,
and I really would like to get the antibody test because our second podcast here we were in with a band called Galaxia. It was in the middle of January, and I had totally lost my voice, and I was jokingly saying, because this was just getting on the radar, I was like, I've got the coronavirus. Well, and I wonder if I really did, because I usually do not get bronchitis, or I think I've had bronchitis once in my life, and this totally wiped out my voice. My lungs were filled with fluid for 6 weeks.
Yeah, it was
and
a while.
I just coughed for a day, and then I just couldn't breathe. And I was like, man, what if I had it for real?
Right. Well, I know I had a robotics tournament. Let's see, I think it was the very 1st of March in Rolla, Missouri. And I just found out recently that one of the teams that was there, the week after, 7 of the adults got sick. And one of them has since been tested and did have COVID.
Oh, man.
And so, there was lots of opportunity for that sort of thing to happen, and it is, on average, their estimates is that every one patient spreads it to 2 people. And, if you do that math, that 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8, right. 16, pretty soon you're up to 32,000, 64,000, it just grows
and
incredibly fast.
Do that over 2 weeks before anybody knows.
Right. Exactly.
So you've got this exponential growth and you go back to, patient 0 that just is starting to get sick.
Right.
So you're like,
that's
okay,
a crazy thing, right? Is you're
the incubation
asymptomatic.
Yeah, the incubation period is nuts.
Right. And that,
that's why my wife is sleeping in an RV right now.
Right.
Because she's a nurse.
Yeah. Shout out to Brooke Austin for her, kick-ass fighting of the coronavirus on the front lines.
She's right there.
And that's where, whether it's my stuff or something else that people use, this idea of massive contact tracing combined with testing, that's the only way you can effectively do it. Because if you don't get tested and a positive result, you can't really begin telling others to perform self-isolation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, you can't just chase the person who's sick. You got to chase the person that the person who was sick was next to and lock that down. But I think, the thing I'm really looking forward to is, this idea of we've got this 14-day window. Once that window is clear, you get to interact with the world, right? And you're going to at times have something that pops up, somebody that I ran into 7 days ago got diagnosed. So I'm going to pull back from the world for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I would much rather, and I've been talking to, CEOs around the world about this idea of they would much rather pay people to stay at home, 10% of their workforce, if they have to pay them to stay at home while that 2-week rolls off, and allow the other 90% of the workforce to continue to do their thing and allow the world to keep flowing. Or if you think about, around the city, a restaurant, if it has to shut down because one of the servers got sick, then shut that restaurant down for 2 weeks. But the rest of the city gets to continue working. If 1 in 10 restaurants is all that has to shut down, that doesn't collapse the economy.
Right.
It's pain. Nobody wants to do it.
Right.
But it allows life to start to resume.
That sounds like a feasible strategy.
Right.
Because you can't keep everybody shut down forever.
Right.
But you don't want everyone just going out there willy-nilly, I guess, without any kind of caution.
Just crossing your fingers and hoping this, whoever it was that's sneezing next to me. It was weird. So in the midst of all this, in late February, early March, I flew to Boston. And so I was in MIT for 7 days. And in the midst of that, they already had a handful of cases, probably, 30 or 40 in Boston at that stage. I think the second day I was there, they stopped classes at Harvard and MIT. The day after that, they announced that they weren't going to resume undergraduate classes. And the day or something after that, they told them they all need to go home this weekend. They're kicking them off campus. And, all of that stuff was happening, around me, all of these things. And in the midst of that, they realized at Harvard, there had been a job fair. And one of the guys that was working the job fair was diagnosed. So hundreds of students had literally shaken hands with this guy 2 days before he got diagnosed. And, just the way all of that spread, and it's silent. And the good and the bad of that, so all of those students there at Harvard who went to the job fair had to ask themselves, did I interact with that guy?
Right.
Because you don't know who the guy was. Or, and that one was relatively easy to at least broadcast what it was. You can think about dozens of other interactions where you're just kind of living on edge, and when I was in the airport trying to come back, I coughed a couple of times just because I was chewing on a bagel, and people looking at me. Every time you coughed, everyone around you, you felt uncomfortable around every stranger.
Yeah.
And that's no way to live.
No.
You mentioned earlier robotics, and you're a robotics enthusiast, and don't you coach a high school robotics team, right?
Yeah. So 2 teams actually. So there's 3409. The Astromechs is our sort of senior team. So it's been around for a little over a decade that we've had that team. And then we've got a secondary team that comes up and down as we have as need. So 5227 is Galactech. And, I originally got involved in robotics when a friend of mine from high school, they were starting a team at a high school in Kansas City, and he asked me to join in to help them, get off the ground. So that was another group of the Bronco Bots, Team 1987. They're doing a program called FIRST, which is originally started with a guy named Dean Kamen, who he was a geek, and he kind of he was the guy who invented a bunch of medical equipment, and then the things most people know him for is the Segway. That was his company that built that, and they did a few other things that that really have helped more in the medical world, but people don't know nearly as well. But Dean Kamen's looking back on life, he's like, I didn't have anything I could do in high school. I didn't play sports. I just didn't have anything to do. I wanted to have something I could have done as a young geek, basically.
Yeah.
And so he started this idea of robots as a competition, as, the sport for geeks kind of. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's been, he worked in combination with a guy who passed away a couple of years ago named Woody Flowers. And they came up with this organization and this philosophy behind it. And, a little bit twingy sometimes, the word cooperation. But I like the thought behind it. It's like, I want to beat you, but I want to beat you when you're at your very best. So if your robot breaks, I'm going to help you fix it. And then I want to meet you on the field and play against you at your best, going against my best.
That's a good word.
I like that.
And learning together and working together. I think all this stuff comes back to the community is super important in so many aspects of life. Being able to work together, being able to contribute to things together, being able to trust the person next to you is going to give you some assistance. That in COVID and robotics and any kind of aspect of your life, if you try to do it solo, one person against the world, maybe you'll make it, but more likely than not, you won't.
Right.
Well, it'd be a hollow victory.
Yeah.
Who are you going to celebrate with?
Yeah. Who wants that?
Yeah.
And also the competitive aspect of that in the positive light of pushing each other to do the very best, that's a...
Well, and think about the bragging rights. Look, dude, I helped you get your robot to the peak and I still kicked your ass.
Yeah. And
you need to go back to the drawing board.
And that's one of the things I'm super proud of, these teams that I've been on, been able to work with. My son's team, when he went through it, there are multiple teams around the area and around the country that are recognized, and they're teams that people don't want to play against because they're scared about losing to them. But our team was known to be one of the teams that not only is great, but that they can go ask questions of. If they need help, they would come to us, and our kids would go out and they would help them rebuild. They'd help them reprogram. They'd help them figure out what was wrong. And, super duper proud of that reputation that they developed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's great for your kids to go out and problem solve, even more chances to work those skills. So.
Right. And, they learned, I don't know if you've ever coached a sport. After playing it, you think you know how to play it.
Right.
But until you tell someone else how to do the thing you can do, you don't actually know what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And that being able to flip sides and look at it through fresh eyes, I think you get so much better at a sport or at an activity once you've taught someone else how to do it.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So, Star Wars or Star Trek?
I'm probably more of a Star Trek guy.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody says it's one or the other, but they are completely different things.
I'm not opposed to either, but, I think Spock influenced me a lot, growing up as a kid watching, his.
Okay. Uh-huh. So original or Next Generation?
So I appreciate Next Generation, but I think of the original series for sure.
Absolutely.
Spock and Kirk. And
not that you've been busy lately or anything, but have you had a chance to see Picard?
I have not.
Highly recommend it. I liked it a lot.
He's itching to talk to somebody about it because
like,
I haven't watched it yet.
But I really liked Next Generation, and this. I mean, I think that you could enjoy this without knowing anything about Next Generation, but it's still cool.
Yeah.
And
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick
Stewart as an individual
and
as
awesome.
a character, he is an excellent figure that he strikes, and
Well, and think about how many, not just iconic roles, but how many iconic films that guy's been in.
Mm-hmm.
Going all the way back to Excalibur, Dune, all the Star Treks, X-Men.
Yeah.
What else we got?
I'm sure there's a ton that I'm drawing a blank on right now.
And then there's all the stage things.
The stage stuff
he
he's done.
does
And then just the one-offs, man. Have either of you guys seen that movie Green Room?
It is on my queue. I have not seen it yet.
Oh, my God. He plays the villain.
Yeah.
He's...
Terrifying.
Yeah. No.
Awesome.
He's just a hell of an actor. But I always go back to Excalibur because that was the first time I've seen him.
Yeah.
And he and Liam Neeson and they're all
a star-studded cast.
And there were all the bit players.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean the major, Arthur and they were just all the I don't know. I've never seen those guys in anything else, you know. I'm sure they have been, but But
yeah, that's one of those movies that I don't know if it launched their careers or it was coincidence that they were all in it together. But you gotta wonder how that influenced their.
Well, and I mean it's the same thing with Dune. I mean, they were. He was a small bit player.
Yeah, Kyle MacLachlan wasn't anything big at that point. I don't think.
But I mean that really put him on the map.
Right. Well, Sting was already somebody, but
But I mean to bring him in and act.
Yeah.
I'm anxious to see the new one. Have you seen any of the stuff on that?
I am a pretty big Dune fan. I always loved the movie, and I can completely understand if you never read the books. There's no way you understood what that movie was about.
And see,
Right,
I'm a huge David Lynch fan too, and I've always loved his quirky outlook.
He is definitely quirky.
He is.
I'm with you on that 100%. Like I loved the way that film looked,
right,
felt,
right.
Even if they were shooting sound guns, like I don't care, it's still just awesome.
That was the times though. I mean, you weren't going to see anything better in anything else outside of maybe Star Wars,
right.
Because they were just pioneers with visual effects. But I think that movie stands up to anything now, and I just imagine what it would be like now.
Yeah.
And the fact that he came in and basically finished the movie. I mean, it wasn't his to begin with.
Right. I'm optimistic about this new film.
Well, the guy doing it is top of his game. So
who is doing it? Do you know the name?
I'll butcher it. It's like Denis
Villeneuve.
Yeah, he did the Blade Runner 2049, and was it Ex Machina? Is that the? Or no, that was
no. He didn't.
That was Alex Garland. What was the first thing he did that got him on the?
I'm so bad with that stuff. You're usually the man when it
I
comes
know.
to
I'll look it up. You talk, I'll look it up.
I'm a huge fan of all of the Blade Runner, the original film. Again, love that movie. I think that soliloquy that Rutger Hauer delivered, is just.
And he's such an underrated actor. I've watched a couple of old 80s, 90s movies with him, and he did several that were cheesy. I mean, don't get me wrong,
totally.
But like just the other day, I watched Surviving the Game. You remember that one with Ice-T?
Yeah.
He's just he was really a really good actor, and he just didn't always get what he deserved.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, doesn't he have like a PhD in physics or something
crazy like that.
Astrophysics.
It's like Dolph Lundgren.
Right. All these guys, they look big and dumb, but there. But I definitely have a soft spot for that generation of 80s sci-fi, was amazing. Alien and Aliens.
Yeah, some of my very favorite.
They just...
he did Arrival.
Arrival.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. I loved Arrival. That was
Actually, he did that first Sicario too. I didn't realize that. That was a dark movie. Oh, well, shit. He did Prisoners. Did you guys watch that one?
I have not watched
that. I watched it once, and it was one of those that you only need to watch it once.
Yeah.
It was like about...
that was a great movie. I never want to watch it again.
Never unsee it.
A guy's daughter gets kidnapped. It's one of those things where I think, he gets in his head that this was the guy that did it. The cops can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. So you know where that goes, and it's not,
right.
Not a happy movie.
Right.
Can I get you a drink or anything? Everybody good?
I'm going to drink a little bit here, and then I may top myself off here.
All right. I'm going to get a drink. So talk amongst yourselves.
Time out.
Let me give you a topic.
All right. If you want to hit me with something, I'll take.
All right. Surprise me.
There you go. But yeah, I think there is something, kind of circling back to the thought of creativity and music and creativity and software and creativity and all these, film, all these other ways. I think there is there's a common thread. I know that I feel like there's a possibility I could have played music. I just didn't ever have really the time to do it. Right. In high school, there was just a limited amount of time on what I could do. And I always have felt like I could do all right on the piano. I can noodle around on a piano reasonably well. But I think there is, that inherent tie, like the Mozart effect of certain music helps you think, helps the way you align your brain waves. I used to listen to Philip Glass when I was doing some stuff that was, highly geometric, trying to solve geometric problems, working at Autodesk on CAD software. Mm-hmm. It just helped me focus, I think, to be able to listen to that sort of repetitiveness. I don't know if it's true or not, but I convinced myself at least that,
at the end of the day, whatever works. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, they're absolutely, I think all these different arts are, and I do consider computer science to be more art than science, and certainly not an engineering.
And I do practice. Too. I mean,
that's a really interesting perspective, because you've been described to me as someone that can see past the code and see the matrix. I see gobbledygook. So I know nothing. So
from now
if you
on,
could elaborate on that,
we're calling him Neo.
Yes.
Okay.
Trust me, it's better than the chosen one.
I will go with that. So when I was taking classes back at University of Kansas is where I got my degree, and at that point, computer science was not brand new, but it wasn't super established. And most computer science departments emerged out of the mathematics department, which is underneath the College of Liberal Arts and Science. And, I think it's always been interesting that math is distinct from the engineering school. It is always under the arts, it's lumped in there with the humanities and with, the English and all of those things. And I think it is fundamentally not something that is engineering is about repeatable processes. If you're building a bridge, there is absolutely some artistry in what you are doing and the visuals of it, but there's also the engineering practices underlying that, calculating the load and all of that. Those are processes that are developed over generations and years and refined. Computer software in particular, kind of like you were talking about, you can duplicate it. And so I don't have to build the same program again and again and again. I build everything one time and it can be copied a billion times.
Right.
And so there is no reason in computer software to have that kind of engineering process exactly like there is with construction sciences and things like that. So you have to constantly be inventing new ways of approaching things or figuring out how to apply something in a new area, a new domain. So applying software to that.
Yeah, and that's kind of how that spills into the arts.
Right.
I mean, I think about video, audio, everything now is done with computers. And I mean, they are married now,
But you still need to have that inspiration or that intuitive spark to do something with those tools.
Right.
So,
well, it's taking that everyday common analog thing and picturing it, I guess, visualizing it as a digital thing, and then making it happen.
Yeah. And I think, that's one thing that's not obvious to everyone. When you're, like you're saying, you look at a piece of software, you see text on a screen.
Right.
And while that is sort of, it's almost like the notes on a page. When you see
it
notes,
looks like a language that I can't understand.
Right.
So and I'm guessing that when you see the notes on a page, you read those notes, yes, but then there's some sort of a visualization. I don't know if you see it as
Or
a
an
literal,
audiation.
or if you hear it. To me, software is pretty visual. I can almost picture these structures, floating around in my head and see the connections between, this method that's being called by this thing over here and that's instantiated over here. And I can see these things tied together. And then as I'm, developing the software and as I'm making changes to it, I can see how I can move things around and establish new connections in new ways and generate new pathways to allow them to interact together. And, it is almost literally visual blocks that I work with.
Okay.
And again, I don't make music the same way you guys are capable of, so I don't know exactly how your brains interact.
I think that's
with
a really
them.
good analogy, actually.
But I think that's a common thread, whether it's programming, whether it's making music, whether it's framing a picture before you snap the shot. It's just the creative mind, the last thing I coded was on a Commodore 64. So, I take that back. I do a lot of HTML work, but a lot of it is reversed engineered. So it's like, I find something I like. Okay. So I'll take that, and kind of work backwards. So I don't visualize what you're talking about, but I kind of see what you're saying, because I know if I go in and I change this, okay, well, now it's not going to be blue, it's going to be red. But from the ground up, that would be freaking awesome.
Yeah. And going back to this extreme case of what we were building over the course of just, a month and a half with COVID, it was not only a single piece of software running on a cell phone, but it really was building this entire process that was going to be multi-level, and being able to figure out how this software could be used by all these individuals, could be consumed by a healthcare organization and agencies, and how they would be able to use that to distribute it to something that gets back out to this community, and then being able to design all of that in such a way and shift some of these pieces to be able to fit with things like HIPAA laws and laws not only in the United States but around the world, and policies and concerns that all of these organizations were going to have when they were looking at if this is coming from the United States, So being able to do this open source to be able to engender trust in what we were doing and allow others to review and to get behind it, running it on GitHub, which is one of the unique websites in the world that is available in virtually every country of the world, is not blocked or filtered by anywhere. And so intentionally placing things there, and designing the system where it's able to operate decentralized so that individual cities can do this. And, all of these pieces, I can't say that on February 27th, I knew exactly all of those things, but, had an idea that we, and Ramesh is communicating his thoughts and adding to his thoughts and building on that. And then taking the input from other people and rejiggering these things that hadn't yet been built totally, and being able to work with ideas and reorganize and shift. It really is, like composing a thing, I believe. I think there's a lot of similarity in that you have this theme that's going through your head, and you're like, no, this is ultimately what I want to do. I got to figure out how to piece it all together.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. A lot of times when composing a piece of music, and I think this stands for any creative anything, if you have no limitations, if you have no framework that you're working within, then you're not going to come up with anything good, because you just it's kind of like this little bit of whiskey, like this cup gives its form, the limits give it form, but if I spilled it out, it would just go, and it'd be nothing. Right. So it is all those constraints that kind of frame the problem for you a little bit. Yeah, I mean, you basically, love them or not, you got to deal with them. And so, you either cry about it, this is impossible to do, or you figure out, well, hell, I got to figure out how to make this work. And you iterate, and you bang your head for a little while, and somebody says something, and whether it's what they literally said or if it just sparks an idea, that you take off on a different tangent from that point, and you get to somewhere new. That's how it works. That's open communications are really key in those things. And
do you find yourself okay? So you get these ideas, you get to this point, and then it's like, oh, well, shit, now I've got a hole. So I got to back up and I got to plug this hole. Right. Talking about HIPAA or something like that. Okay. Right. Yeah, this is great. Oh shit. Well, we gotta plug this hole. Yep. So now that creates a new branch that we've got to build on. So to do this shit in a month, man, that just blows my mind. Right. It's, and want to be completely clear, I did not do all of this on my own. Well, this is not just me doing all these things. The best of the open source development type thing occurred with this. People were showing up, people were volunteering. So people came in with if you looked at the very, very first generation of the interface of the software, it was super ugly. And, some guys showed up with this, 80% built, beautiful user interface that they had been working on top of what we had made public. And they had been quietly working on this and just brought it to us and said, can we work together on this? And just amazing that you have those sorts of things happen. Yeah. But I mean, for all of that, you're just at the same time, you're adding more pieces to the chessboard. And it's like, how do these all work together? Right. I mean, some of them got to come in and realistically have to be creating more problems than helping. And that is one of the hard things. And again, I think I had the advantage of being the right person at the right place. Having worked on Mycroft for all these years, working in the open community, there is a way of, you don't want to just, someone brings you something that they've been working on for a long time and they're like, I want to do this. You don't want to just say, well, that's a dumbass idea. Right. It's crap. It's crap. Either, and most of the time, few ideas are completely dumbass. If it was worth them putting that much effort into it, there is something about it that is valuable. So either telling them, this is where it's problematic, and what can we do to eliminate those problems, or how can we do this? Or maybe, sometimes there were a few things that are like, I really like the idea. The way you implement it isn't going to work. We're going to take this idea and we're going to do it another way and bring it in. And, if you can communicate that to people, and if people who are coming in are, able to step back a little bit from ego to say, oh yeah, totally. As long as it's being used and being taken in and valuable,
that's the best of the best. And, I think one of the nice things about this is throughout this process, there were, everyone's tired, everyone's been working really hard, but amazingly few people have been, jerks throughout this. Everyone recognizes we're doing this for the right reason, is the best possible reason that someone is there. If they aren't being listened to, no one raised a massive stink. And
that's great. I think you just touched on one of the things I love about these discussions is we find kind of a universal truth every now and again. Mm-hmm. When you're working in a creative environment with a group of people, that's necessary. That, if someone brings an idea, you need to have an open mind enough to listen to it, even if your initial thought is this is not going to work. Yep, there could be something of value there. I think that's really important, and again, for the other person to bring that in, because you're bringing in an idea that you're attached to, then you're showing vulnerability,
right?
But at the same time, you can't just automatically get defensive and combative. Right. You need to be able to take criticism. So that give and take, that passing back and forth of power, is really important, and in any creative endeavor, I love that.
I was trying to find one of the guys that worked with us in this project. Rich had been an engineering director at Google, and so he's got every right to be pretty, proud of what he's done.
Sure,
but he's the greatest, humblest guy. And, he worked with us for a few weeks, and then he had to step back for something. But he made a post that he worked on for quite a while about when you arrive to assist, what to do and what not to do. And, one of the things to not do is to show up and explain to everyone how great you are and ask them, so what am I supposed to do? He says, that's the least useful thing you can possibly do. What you do is you look around and you see what needs to be done. And if the trash needs to be taken out, you take the trash out. And, if somebody needs, if the ice machine is empty, you go figure out, is it broken, and fix it, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter what your pedigree is. And you start figuring out how to be of value, because the people who are already there are busy doing what needs to be done. And you got to learn, you got to, you got to figure out how you fit into their group, not how that group can change itself to fit into you. And
you should never be too proud to take the trash out.
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone should be able to take out the trash.
Yeah.
So to be a great leader, you need to know how to be a good follower too, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I am a big proponent. One of the interviews for the company that I currently work for, DOS was asking someone if I was the type of person who would be willing to, write a little bit of the code too, because he'd been used to a lot of people who were leaders who never actually dug in. And whoever he's talking to is like, oh yeah, like he's going to be.
They weren't leaders; they were just tyrants.
Right. And there are different ways of doing stuff. I'm not saying that I'm the only one that knows how to do it. Right. But in my world, my personal belief is I'm not going to know how to lead if I don't know what is being done on the ground. I've got to be at some level involved at that level to be able to decide what makes sense for them.
Right.
So.
Late in life, Howard Hughes kind of went off the rails and stuff. But one thing a story that I heard was that, he would go at the ground level. He would do every job, every job in the company. He would do it and experience it. So he knew what those people were going through, knew how to, direct them.
Right.
That's an impressive kind of mindset.
You see what it did to him.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with the money. It was going to the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I've had the fortune of meeting a lot of people around through the different tech companies I've been involved in and all. And really just about everyone who is, entrepreneurial understands the value of just getting in and doing things, and
so who was the biggest asshole? I'm just kidding.
No, I'm not going to call anyone specific.
I'm just kidding.
But
Initials.
I think there is something that anyone who started a company understands that. I think it's people who show up and take over leadership who have not lived through the creation process. It's much more difficult for them to understand, what effort was put into making this occur. And, to be as sympathetic or empathetic with, what is being done in the work. Not that none of them can, but, that some of the worst examples probably have been people who were hired to be the CEO or something like that. And, they just showed up and there's this functioning company. And so they're looking at, how can I cut costs? How can I do this? And they're trying to do these things without,
taking into
sometimes
account
you've
what's
got to do
really
it
successful.
But yeah, sometimes you don't understand why this thing exists before you cut it. You need to know why it's there. It's usually there for a reason. Things didn't get created just because they wanted to create a new department. It's there for a very good reason. And if you don't believe that, and if you don't understand what that reason was and be able to understand, is the reason no longer there? Then that's a good reason to get rid of that. Or is it capable? Is there a new capability that can do that thing? Then, okay, that's fine. But otherwise, if you just cut it, that reason's going to crop up again.
Sure.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I have for a couple of months now thought of, we talk about the raising minimum wage, different things like that. Thought, what if we just changed the whole model? What if everybody got, you could still have tiered pay levels, but instead of getting that annual raise, what if every year you got more time? You get more time off.
Yeah. Other incentives. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would much rather get older and have way more free time than just have more money.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that would incentivize the new employees coming in, to learn these jobs so that then they go on. I don't know. That was kind of a side note there, but
I forget the name of the study or the person that put it forth, but they say that like after making a certain amount of money, your happiness doesn't really increase at that point because you got your basic needs taken care of.
Yeah.
And so
you spend a little more. And that's just what it boils down to. But I think I'd rather have more time, especially, granted, I have been working, but I've been working more from home. So I've had a little more time, and obviously you've heard the results of that.
Yeah, he's been writing music like a madman. It's awesome.
I really, really enjoy having more time, and I'd love that. I just hit 10 years at the company I'm at, so I got a whole new, whole extra week's vacation. Well, what if I've been accruing a day every year?
Right.
You had a fair livable wage from the start, and do an extra day, and maybe offer a buyback at the end of the year, like a lot of companies do. Mine doesn't. I either use my days off or lose them.
Yeah.
But maybe give me, if I needed more money at the end of the year, then I sell back a week.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
I listen to one of my favorite podcasts right now that I listen to is called The Portal, with a weirdly controversial figure. I don't really see how or why, but Eric Weinstein. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Mathematician.
Listen to him on Rogan.
Yeah. Dude that's like kind of so smart sometimes he blows my mind. Might be on your level. But he had on this guy that he was calling it Plan B, like Eric Weinstein was saying that, basically we're on a path, like eventually, whether it be 100 years, 1,000 years, like we've been terribly lucky and we're going to destroy ourselves because our wisdom doesn't match our destructive capability or our technological capability. So he says, like, some of us need to get off the planet, like out of our solar system. We need to crack we need to unify physics, find out our source code, and like figure out how to create the warp drive or something.
Right,
what I mean? So that's like his plan A. This other guy said, no, well, here's plan B. Here's how we engineer a society and an economy, a global community or whatever that can survive, be sustainable, is not predicated on infinite growth, because that's gonna, that's not sustainable. So, and like, it was pretty far out there, but it was really interesting. So along your like taking your idea and just going like, all right, 1,000 years in the future, what's things going to look like? This guy's ideas were just like really interesting to me. So,
talking about the sustainable growth, there's always been a thing that always got me, where they say no energy in the universe ever disappears. So when we die, the energy that runs our bodies, moves into. So where the hell is all the energy coming from for this population? So if you started from one, then you had two, exponential growth. Where did all that energy come from?
Food and plants and stuff that's consumed,
Well, and ultimately, right now, it's being fed
you're going to burn that out.
But it's ultimately being fed by the sun.
Yeah.
So
something's going to give.
Right.
Yeah.
So, at some stage when the sun burns out, right, that's where things really go down. But the planet has been literally absorbing energy from the sun every single day.
Yeah.
Since back then, and that's where dinosaurs absorbed it and became oil and gas, right? So that's really what keeps us rolling on our planet.
Yeah.
But at some stage, it goes away, right?
Yeah.
And
or like say, turns into something else.
Right.
Yeah.
It stays, but there isn't any more to add to it, right?
Right.
And
nothing more for us to take.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of the ultimate depressing, if you look at one of the theories of the universe is that, as their universe spreads, it's not that it burns out, it gets gray and dull, and everything becomes the same temperature, and all energy just sort of stops. Everything just stops moving.
Yeah.
And, this Big Bang spreads, and there's, this incredibly compressed amount of mass and energy that's spread out, and now it's continuing to spread and will continue to spread until finally sort of all the momentum breaks down, all the energy spreads evenly across the whole thing, and it's just great.
Now, isn't there another theory that it will get so big and then it will retract?
I think that's been proven that it the universe is speeding up. You would think that if that was the case, it would be slowing down. I think that's pretty much.
I always wondered if there was such a thing as a universal inertia. So when it starts slowing down, does everybody get light? You know what I mean?
And
deep thoughts on Off the Edge podcast.
There you go.
Yeah. No, I love it. This is what I live for. This stuff, man. This is great.
This is what happens when you give me whiskey.
So you find out these new things, and some of the most brilliant and people I've known have PhDs in physics, and at the end of that, their philosophy, I think, is often, well, I understand the laws of the universe, so I can solve any problem. I know it all at this stage.
Physics sucks.
I find, like, if I was a younger man right now, I could see myself really just diving into that. Like
did Quentin.
I do not have the mathematical know-how and background to really dive in and really digest all that stuff, but I find it fascinating.
Yeah, well, and I don't think that the Quentin, he's my oldest son. He's a polymer chemistry major. I don't think he doesn't still find it fascinating.
Right.
He's just
like, this is
too sucks.
breaking my brain. Yeah.
Well, and one of the failings, I think, of the way math is taught is it's taught in isolation. So like, you know, calculus, why does calculus exist? Because of physics. That it was created to solve problems in physics. And it's not necessarily taught that way, though. It's taught independently. And so you're doing all these things, and you're like, why am I doing integration? This sounds stupid. You know, this whole entire process. I specifically remember if you ever did anything with matrix math and matrix multiplication, and it's this convoluted process where you're multiplying this by that, and why the hell? I literally remember thinking, this is the dumbest thing ever. Well, now, you know, 5 years down the road, I started doing things in computer 3D graphics, and you can use matrix multiplication and multiply a vector by a matrix to do a perspective transformation. So at XYZ coordinate, that's how you make it look like a point on the screen. Okay. You know, so games like Doom, that's like what makes
3D
it work.
Graphics
to make those 3D graphics that as you spin around, everything just changes. It's because you change this matrix and you multiply all those pixels, all those points defining the scene again, and you have the new scene transmuted from a new perspective. If they had taught math along with, you know, a game design class simultaneously, all right, guys, we're going to learn to do matrix multiplication because that's how we're going to be able to start doing 3D games. Yeah. That would completely change the game. Everyone would be like, oh, hell yeah, I want to learn how to do that. You know, there's so much of the math that gets presented, I think, in ways that you don't realize till
practical application.
Yeah, I always struggled with that. I took statistics in college, and I struggled so hard with that. And then I went to further my education in the business school, and I took business statistics. It was all the same math, and I aced it with no problem because I saw
the reasons.
Yeah, I saw like why we were doing things. Like the steps made sense then. They weren't some abstract thought and hard to remember.
Right.
Would have worked too if you were a baseball fan.
Yeah, probably so.
The statistics in baseball are amazing, and you know I'm one team baseball fan, and I don't dive into statistics, but they have statistics for everything.
Everything. Yeah.
You know, they could tell you what ball player twisted his foot in the dirt 3 times before, he hit a home run.
Right.
It's just amazing. And that's a whole career, you know?
And then applying those statistics, to, statistically on a third at bat on a sunny day in this stadium by a 33-year-old with a knee injury from 4 weeks ago, he's going to just have this and this happen.
Yeah, and because of that, you'll see the whole infield shift over because statistically he's going to hit it here.
Right.
And so the whole adage, started back in the 20s of hit the ball where it ain't, or hit the ball where they ain't, It's just adding that improbability into these people's statistics because the statistics are so good. I think a lot of times that's why people think modern baseball's boring, because if it's not out of the park, then 99% of the time they're going to get out.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. I think it's horribly boring.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think it's obvious to most people, but most of what people call artificial intelligence nowadays and machine learning, what that actually is applied statistics. So statistics basically tell you historically, this is what's happened, right? Machine learning is basically just being able to take that historical data and make a prediction.
Just apply probabilities to it.
It's applying that probability.
Right.
So, and that probability can be applied in so many different ways. So, historically, when I hear this pattern of sound waves, that has meant that someone spoke these words. And that's how machine learning is able to transcribe, a voice into written words. Is it has just listened to, it's trained on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of recordings of someone speaking, and then a transcription of what that person said, and it's learned through the statistics of that, and then it's making a prediction based off of those statistics. I mean, that's what machine learning is for pretty much completely.
Machine learning for idiots.
But on top of that, millions of that, they're still limited by those probabilities.
Right. And it can only predict what it has seen. So, there are limitations, and that's, I think, where human brain continues to have an advantage over a machine brain. This artificial intelligence right now, it doesn't have epiphanies. It can often see things, and sometimes they can see patterns better than a human can, and discern subtleties better than a human can, but it's never going to, make a leap of intuition. It just doesn't exist. And, whether it's a random neuron firing that makes it happen, or whether it's the whiskey you just drank, or whatever it is that humans have.
Do you think that that's a computational problem, or do you think something else like, consciousness is a weird, funny.
Right.
It's unquantifiable at this point, at least.
Yeah. Will there ever be a machine that is able to be intuitive? I don't know. It's going to have to be far larger than any machine that exists today, for sure.
We are machines. We're biological machines, but we are machines. So will it happen? Yeah. In our lifetimes? Probably not. But I think it will happen. Something other than us is going to have to become self-aware. Whether or not that's...
I think we probably need to unlock just how our brains work, probably.
Yeah, that's one of the things that one of the companies I worked for previously was a company called Gene Network Sciences. And one of the things that fascinated me was we were doing some work with cardiac tissue. And you would think that, the human heart, the biology and the physiology behind it, we've been studying that sort of stuff for, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And you think it'd be pretty well understood, but there is still, or at least as of 10 years ago, there was still a huge debate over how many types of cells there are in a heart. Is it actually just one type of cell, or are there 7 types of cells, or somewhere in between? There is a lot that at the most fundamental basic biological level, they still don't have a definitive answer for. So our brains, we have a reasonable guess of, how neurons and memory and all that works, but it's still not actually
still
truly, totally understood.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, when did they kind of discover like DNA? Was it like the...
Been a few years, but
but in the grand scheme of things, it's a really short amount of time.
Right.
So, again, we live in exciting times where I think there's breakthroughs, probably something really simple that just when someone figures it out, we'll be like, oh, that was it. It was right there.
I'm just waiting for the Kung Fu port.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do the Neo thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I got invited to this program. I was able to go up to there's a place called Fermilab outside of Chicago, which is particle physics, particle collider. And there at that time, they were still sorting out sort of the really low level, what are quarks and all of those. What is the universe made of? What is the smallest piece of below atoms and below neutrons, and what is actually down there, and looking for that unified theory of the universe. And one of the goals was they were hoping to get it small enough you could print it on a T-shirt. If it's bigger than that, it's too complicated to actually explain everything. That it should it felt like it should be explainable by a few very, very basic principles.
Right. Kind of like how Einstein's stuff boiled down to E equals MC squared.
Right. There's got to be something super, super simple like that.
Which I'm sure it was a long, complicated process to get to that. But then you boil it down and it's super simple. Yeah. Like, duh. I'm sure it's right there in front of their faces.
One of the other things I thought was cool when I was up there, they were still working. This is before like chaos theory and string theory and all that. So there were dozens of theories that were bouncing around. And one of the theories that was apparently like this 14-dimensional universe that these guys were working on and trying to figure it out. And for one, it was incredibly difficult for anyone to envision and imagine what this 14-dimensional universe would work like. And someone realized that everyone, or at least most of the people working on that, were actually blind.
Really?
And so they weren't as constrained in their visualization because of the fact they weren't constrained by that.
That's, again, going back to the podcast that I really like, The Portal, Eric Weinstein is trying to take a shot at that, and, in a theory, it's not a theory, I guess, maybe it's a hypothesis that he calls geometric unity, which he starts out with, 4 dimensions because that's what we can perceive. I'm guessing that's why he starts there. And he doesn't define space different than time. He just says 4 dimensions, and then using rulers and protractors, he gets to 14 dimensions. Yeah, and then just starting at that basic starting point, and then try to go to there, but to unify the geometry used in quantum and in field theory.
Right.
Try to unify those two things instead of trying to quantize gravity or something like that. Which, again, I have no idea how the math works, but I find it fascinating. We're over my head, but I like swimming in the deep end, I guess.
Yeah. But I love the ideas of perception, and how the same world we're looking at, like what's the name of that? I'm totally spacing out on this. There's a great YouTube video about these things that can punch faster than the speed of sound.
Are they crab?
Yeah, it's like a crab thing.
Yeah.
But they've also got 7 different cones. So, we basically have 3 cones, and there are a few humans that have 4. Well, these guys have 7 cones. So they're seeing colors that, looking at the same thing that I'm looking at, they see it in a completely different way than I'm able to. And, that's just sort of mind-blowing. What can the world look like if you had that additional set of sensors that, that I don't have, right?
Right.
It's like looking at the blind person, how are they limited, in that they can't see at all? Well, I'm only half blind to this creature, because I can only see half of what it's able to perceive.
Be like the predator.
Right. Yeah. Shift through different spectrums.
Yeah. We make movie references quite often.
Yeah.
Okay, I make movie references quite often.
And
I live my life by the silver screen.
Right. And he makes me realize just how crappy I am at remembering all the references.
Movie trivia.
When I thought I was good at it before, but no.
I can remember the movies. I can't remember the actors. Yeah, I'm horrible with names.
I
generally am too.
With most people, but I do all right with actors. I can tell you about movies I've never even seen just because I've seen the trailer and it stuck.
It's your superpower, huh?
I guess. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
He'll sit there and quiz me a lot of times. Be like, "What is this from?" I'm like, "Dude, I don't know. Quit torturing me."
I've done that to my kids. Quentin has risen to the challenge. He's still not as good as the old man, but
yeah, he's getting pretty good.
He is.
It's nothing better than watching your kids get better and better. Yeah, my son's he's getting pretty close. We'll see. Yeah. He's definitely better at some things than I am.
It's heartbreaking because I have a feeling that I have Alzheimer's in my future because there's There's little times where I should know it, and I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Doesn't matter if it's, not family or if I don't know something movie related, then there's a problem.
That's how they'll know.
Yeah.
A wire got knocked loose.
Time to put them down.
Yeah.
What do you think going forward? Like you mentioned, your son. My daughters, your sons. Like the future of fields like computer science, AI, all these things. Do you see a bright future for young people getting into these fields? And it is I don't know how to frame it, but are the tools there for them to really get in there and get their hands dirty with it and take the next step with it?
Yeah, I think so. When I was first starting in computers, it was back in the IBM PC days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the original PC and Peter Norton, and you had to understand assembly language, and you had to understand the way memory was laid out, and the way you drew things on screen was actually poking values into memory, and it all built up. And for years, I wondered, how in the world is anyone going? Because it took me, a decade of build up all this knowledge to be able to do the things I was able to do. And it's like, how is anyone ever going to start? And then around the days of Windows emerging, and that created kind of what they called the hardware abstraction layer. So it allowed you to sort of ignore what happened under the hood. You just knew this abstraction of, well, here's a screen, and don't worry about exactly how it does it, but you do these things and stuff appear on the screen. It's like, okay, that allowed us to get over that hurdle of having to learn all of this information. And object-oriented allowed you to treat things as objects rather than having to understand what the object did to implement the problem.
Like what was actually going on mechanically or
right.
Yeah.
You're just operating with this thing. You don't have to know why the drill spins when you pull the trigger. Just when you pull the trigger, it does a spinny thing and it makes holes. That's all you got to understand. So that allowed the software industry to progress for a while. Then we got to the point where, I think in like the late 90s, a lot of the things that needed to be solved for computers themselves was solved, and it went into an era of applying computer science to other fields. So, the first years it was really about creating the spreadsheet and creating the word processor and all that. And that was building up this thing. But now once you had those things in place, it became, how do you use these tools in the field of, music and video, and became video editor tools. And then how do you use it in the field of traffic, so like my company, the traffic engineering world hadn't been touched since the 70s. But we added this ability to use video cameras and analyze traffic flow and start changing the pattern of the lights with computers that could do this instantaneous analysis. And so it was really about finding different domains and applying that knowledge in that other domain. And I think computers have done a good job of that throughout. I think there's going to be more of that sort of hybrid thinking of, how do I apply this knowledge from this area over in this other area in a way that is productive,
Right.
And so I don't think we're out of new thoughts, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of combining like ballet with mechanical engineering to create a robot that can walk and do things. I think there's stuff like that, completely unrelated seemingly fields that can come together and produce something that neither field independently would have been able to do.
Okay.
It's maybe more task oriented than.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to limit it exactly. I think that humans are creative. I think it's going to be. I hope that that there's. Well, combining with a couple other things. So going back to what you were talking about, like minimum wage, and minimum wage actually being extended into like the idea of a minimum livable wage, right? Where as a society, we're getting close to the point where scarcity is no longer what should be driving us. We've got automation, we've got, technology to produce more and more food. We've got technology to produce labor that isn't human labor to produce the food and all that. So we're getting to a point where abundance is more the norm than scarcity. And so, if you look across history, it used to be you woke up, and from the moment you woke up, you were fighting to stay alive, and you're having to find food, and you're having to fight off, creatures, and you're having to find somewhere to spend the next night and hopefully survive to the next morning and to do it all over again. And then we got to, the societies that start working together. So you get to like sleep in peace without being worried that a tiger is going to eat you or something like that. And then you got to where you had specialization. So you don't have to know how to make your own clothes. Somebody else can make clothes for you, and you can get really good at doing this one thing, right? And the idea of a weekend emerged, and there are 2 days you don't have to work. And then, the ideas of a 40-hour work week came along. And so I think historically,
you don't have to go work in a factory when you're 5 anymore.
Yeah. And you have 18 years of your life where you get to just learn and then you have a retirement, And so I think all of these things have grown to less and less necessity to work. And so I think society's getting close to that next level of, I don't know if it's you don't work ever, but it's more of you have maybe it's only a 20-hour work week, or maybe it's a minimum wage that guarantees you can eat and live, but then you are able to apply yourself in whatever other way. So, I know the Dutch have experimented with this idea of a basic income. And as a result of that, people are able to become sculptors and invest, 6 months of their life in learning to do some new technique without worried about how do I pay my bills while I'm learning this thing. And as a society, I think there's probably a lot of value in that. I think we may need to learn how to deal with ways of encouraging people, not because it is comfortable to just sit and watch Netflix, right?
Right.
And so how do you fight against that? And how do you incentivize that? But ultimately, I think there's still tons of things to be discovered. And, humans are good at that. And allowing us to do that is where I hope I'm getting, and I hope I'm getting my kids to the point where they're able to synthesize all these things that are around them in new and unique ways. And, ultimately, I think people want to be creative.
Right.
That's why most people have a hobby that is creative in some way, right?
Like, I love the idea, not saying anything on the, validity of a UBI or not saying I'm against capitalism. I'm not trying to make any kind of statement like that, but I love the idea of a person just being able to devote time to like obscure techniques or something to further an art form or to further a field in some way that's going to benefit, all of humanity, either in just enhance their enjoyment of life somehow with some art, or creating a product that will enrich someone's life.
Yeah,
just philosophically, I like that. I want that for humanity.
It doesn't even have to be a contributor to society. I just like to have people to have something,
living a meaningful life.
Well, just to not get up, go to work, do your job, to pay the bills, but you're too freaking exhausted when you get home. You veg out for Netflix and you go to bed, you know, and then repeat the process. You might have some fun watching a season of Tiger King, but you know, there's nothing rewarding about that. Yeah. There's nothing enriching to your life. So it's through the motions until you're gone.
It's figuring out the incentives, right?
Right.
I think that's again something that this virus is kind of seeing. It's like we've got a lot of bad incentives in place in certain places.
Yeah.
But I also think, you know, people are learning after having sat for 4 weeks in a house watching Netflix. It ain't that fun.
Right.
Well, at some point you need to do something.
You want to do things. Yeah. There is an innate desire, I think, to do things and to be in some way productive.
Yeah.
Like the guy with the clock.
Yeah.
The guy with the clock. Like, man, I want to do something meaningful. Like, I want to put my stamp on the world somehow. I'm going to build this clock.
Yeah, you know what? I honestly think
we all need to build our clocks, man.
The best incentive through this whole thing, and it may not be uniquely American, but it's definitely an American trait, is the fact that we were told not to do this.
Yeah.
So now everybody's incentivized. Oh, well, we got to do this. You know, the fact that you're told not to.
And I feel it myself. Like I totally agree that social distancing is the right move. Like I agree with that. But the government or an authority figure telling me that I have to do that, I'm just like, that's not American.
Right,
you know,
right.
You know,
I'm gonna do it because I think it's the right thing to do, but not because you told me.
Yeah, but you know, you get both sides of it, because you know, you got that one kid in class that won't shut up, and so the whole class can't go after recess.
Right.
That teacher's the government. Okay. And I get that perspective, but the flip side of that is if you were in that class and the teacher just walked out the door and said, y'all take care of it. You know, and somebody's going to have a soap party and beat the shit out of that kid, and they're going to go out and have recess.
Right.
So, you know, if they just made it legal for us to take care of idiots, you know.
It'd be like the Purge movies.
In a way. Yeah. You know, the point being is that there's no real right answer there.
No, I know. Yeah.
And I mean, I totally get both sides of it. I don't want the government telling me what to do, but they're not from my perspective, they're not telling me what to do because I'm already doing what I need to do.
Yeah.
It's that asshole out there that, you know, is like, woo, America.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
There's always a guy going, party.
Yeah.
Ripping his shirt off.
You know, all the people on spring
Firing
break in Florida and shit, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the hard things is also sometimes realizing the value of what somebody's done. And, you know, maybe it'll be years before the value even comes to light. There's a division of math called Bayesian mathematics. And it's all based on basically this monk, you know, a couple hundred years ago that was recording a bunch of things about plants. And at the time, it probably looked pretty idiotic that he's sitting there, he's measuring leaves and he's doing all this stuff. And we're like, what are you doing? And he's, you know, just writing all this stuff down. For years, he was doing this stuff. And it became a basics of how to do probabilistic predictions of things. But it took years of what looked like stupid effort to make that happen. Or, you know, there's another guy that I worked with at GNS. There was a branch of mathematics that, for better or worse, the guy that created it was enamored with the idea that it was completely useless. And he loved that he was creating this branch of mathematics that only existed for cerebral reasons. And unfortunately, we started doing something with it that actually had value. And this guy
was disappointed.
Well, he was dead. He'd been dead for about 100 years.
But
I see. 100 years ago, he was thrilled by how pure this thing was, that it had no practical value at all. And Robert used to always laugh about this, you know, how the guy's got to be flipping in his grave because we figured out a way to use it. No?
Right.
But, you know, sometimes you can't. It's hard to judge at this instant. what might be valuable down the road,
Right.
Right. Yeah. I think that COVID is just like the movie The Happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nature's taken back.
Yeah. But I think that point is interesting. And again, this is kind of like maybe a philosophical point, that it would be really great if we could magically wave our magic wand and just make it so that people could explore. Just do those things that don't have any practical short-term gains, but maybe our grandchildren will benefit from that.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that long-term perspective.
I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're also...
No, I don't either, but...
I think we're closer. It's just some of the... I don't think it's distributed equitably yet, I think more people could invest more time in different ways. Do you need to retire at 60? Maybe not, maybe there are other ways of figuring out how to spread the free time, So I think the value of time is starting to dawn on people, how great it would be to not be in a car for 2 hours commuting.
Yeah.
How great it would be to, have a day a week to concentrate on whatever your personal passion is,
Or, just to have the energy when you get home, when you're done with your day.
Right.
A lot of times that's what holds me back. And, I don't walk all day.
Yeah, no, I get home and then I've got a 2-year-old at home that needs my attention, and then she goes to bed, and then I might have an hour.
Right.
And I'm pooped.
Right.
Yep. So you watch Tiger King. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I still haven't watched that.
No, I haven't watched it either, but
Brooke watched it and told me all about it, so I feel like I know it. Plus, I've seen all the memes.
Right.
I just, Carol Baskin.
Yeah.
Fucking bitch.
Saw a coworker of mine had a package addressed to that B Carol Baskins. It's like, all right, that's pretty good.
Did you see my Liger King?
No.
I did a mashup. I took the Tiger King. Basically, I don't know if it was a mugshot, but it's head on, and then put Napoleon's face over it.
Yeah.
So, the Liger King.
Nice.
Getting some traction on that one.
See, it's that kind of creativity.
I'm going to ask you maybe one final question. It's an easy question. Are we living in a simulation?
I do not believe we're living in a simulation. No.
Okay.
How about that flat Earth?
Total
No.
flat earther here. Yeah, no, I don't. No.
I just think the simulation argument is a fun argument. So I thought I'd ask you what you thought of it. But do you have anything else you want to share with us on?
No, it's been fun.
Awesome.
It has.
Where can people
download the app?
So if you're interested in what we're doing, if you go to covidsafepaths.org, that'll get you. You can learn about what we're doing. You'll have information on this, have information on the app. Now, one of the things that I do want to make clear is when you first install the app, most places don't have, because this is designed around a system involving the healthcare authorities. So when you first put it on your phone here in Kansas, there are no healthcare authorities making use of the system yet. Mm-hmm. However, it is still useful, if nothing else, to keep track of where you have been, so that once the system does get online here, then you already have that history behind you, and you're able to use that information to help protect the those you love and your community. This is of immediate value to allow that history to start building up.
Awesome.
Another side question with that. So let's say you had it installed on Livy's phone.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's tracking all her information or her location. Say she was abducted.
Mm-hmm.
would he, as a parent, is there any kind of access for that? Because then
it is on the phone. So if she had it in her pocket, there's nothing you can do about it.
Okay.
You know, for better or worse. That's the cost of privacy is, you know, that little bit of there's always that thing, you know, how can I get a little more information out of this? And, you know, being able to upload it automatically, wouldn't that solve that problem? And it might, you know,
but who has access to it?
Yeah. That's the next question, you know, why are you doing that? And, you know, is the cost of doing that worth it?
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If people want to connect with you, or if you want to give out that information, where could they find you on social media or anything like that?
I do not do a ton of social media you can find me, you know, probably easiest way on LinkedIn. You're able to connect up with me there, Steve Penrod. If you go to my company, Triple Blind Market, which is actually an extension, tripleblind.market. There's a little bit of information about what we do there, but it's not directly consumer technology that we're doing, but you can see, you know, we've got some blogs of what we talk about and what we're doing and why we're doing and why privacy is an important thing. It's not always obvious. It sounds like it's a highfalutin thing, but it has very specific values to society. When we're able to guarantee privacy, it allows us to do more things together.
I think more and more people are talking about privacy now. I mean, there for a while, everyone said, "Oh, my privacy," and then click the button that gives away all my privacy,
Right.
you know, without reading anything. But it's super important. I'm glad that you're concentrating on that. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing with this application to track and help prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Man, thank you so much for spending your valuable time and the little bit of time that you had with us.
Appreciate it. Like I said, it's nice to stop thinking about that for a wee bit and, you know, have opportunity to talk about Predator and and Dune and all those other wonderful things that exist in this world.
Awesome. Well, I hope when you have a moment, I'm sure that there's a million other things that we could talk about, and I hope you'll come back.
I would love to.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You have more time.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. You've been Off the Edge with Steve Penrod. Hope that you will all find us on YouTube. Please subscribe and hit that little bell icon to be notified of new episodes. And you can find us on Google Podcasts and just about every other place. What's the other one? Spotify, of course.
Yes.
So please subscribe, share with your friends. We appreciate you. Thanks.
Peace.